You believed the hunger was noble, a sacred Promethean quest for light. It began as a subtle hum beneath the floorboards of your consciousness, a promise whispered through fiber optic cables that omniscience was not a myth for gods, but a birthright for the connected. A lie, a perfect lie. You swallowed it whole. And now, the ghost limb of that ambition twitches to the rhythm of a server farm's cooling fans. It is a hunger that no longer nourishes. It only consumes. This is not a story about phones, not about social media, not even about technology. This is about how the pursuit of knowing everything quietly destroyed your ability to understand anything. Look closer. Inside your own skull, a quiet war is being waged, not with bombs, but with signals. That phantom vibration in your pocket, a nerve ending outsourced to silicon. It's not a message. It is a precisely calibrated neurological event, a pinprick of synthetic light injected directly into your reward circuits, a crystalline shard of validation that dissolves on contact. This is not communication. This is conditioning, executed with the cold, sterile efficiency of a surgical strike. The Hebbian axiom, twisted into a weapon against you. Neurons that fire together, wire together, and your neurons now fire in perfect, obedient synchronicity with the machine's pulse. A digital purgatory. You check. You scroll. You are rewarded not with knowledge, but with the fleeting chemical anesthetic of novelty. A microburst of dopamine. Then the trough. The bone-deep, gnawing emptiness that follows. The itch returns, more insistent this time, and you scratch. The architecture of your focus began to fracture long ago. You feel it as a low-grade informational hemorrhage, the inability to hold a single, coherent thought for more than a few seconds before it is cannibalized by another. This is the calculated outcome of cognitive overload. The human brain, a marvel of biological engineering, possesses a working memory designed for the savannah, not for the simultaneous onslaught of 6 news feeds, 3 social timelines, and an unending stream of ephemeral messages. The load-bearing walls of your memory groan under the pressure. Details become fluid. Convictions become porous. What did you read 5 minutes ago? The headline remains, a hollowed-out husk. But the substance has already decayed into the digital ether. Your mind, once a cathedral of synthesized ideas, is being systematically deconstructed into a scrapyard of isolated data points. 1,000 facts, 0 wisdom. They call it information foraging, a sanitized term for an atavistic pathology. The predator, you, stalking the scent of a signal through the infinite digital brush. But the prey is an illusion. The algorithm, an intelligence without a soul, is not your guide. It is your handler. It has performed 1 billion autopsies on 1 billion captured attention spans, and it knows you with a terrifying non-human intimacy. It knows the precise frequency of outrage that will hold you, the specific shade of envy that will make you scroll faster, the exact dosage of hope required to keep you hooked. It exploits your attentional bottleneck with a scalpel's precision. force-feeding you a slurry of fragmented truths and exquisitely tailored falsehoods. It doesn't need you to believe anything. It only needs you to look, to keep looking. This is the genesis of the new anxiety, not the fear of the unknown, but the paralytic terror of the infinitely known, a restlessness that settles deep in the marrow. It manifests in the calcified silence between heartbeats, in the sudden, visceral need to fill any void with more stimulus, more noise. This is digital fatigue, the necrotic bloom of a mind force-fed, a diet of pure, contextless information. The ability to synthesize, to connect disparate ideas into a meaningful whole begins to atrophy. Your internal narrative, the very story of who you are, is no longer a cohesive arc, but a chaotic collage of contradictory memes, fleeting headlines, and the disembodied opinions of strangers. You are drowning in the shallow end of the data pool, and here, in the howling vortex of the feed, is the final, brutal epiphany. You stand at the center of a hurricane of simultaneous warring truths. The climate is collapsing. The climate is a hoax. A new technology will save us. That same technology will enslave us. Your body is a temple. Your body is a flawed machine in need of constant optimization. They pour into you, each canceling the other out in a blinding flash of cognitive dissonance. The illusion of omniscience shatters, and the raw mechanism is laid bare. The pursuit was never about accumulating knowledge. It was about sustaining the neurochemical cycle of the hunt. The goal was not the answer. The goal was the loop, a self-perpetuating engine of desire and distraction, leaving you perfectly informed and utterly powerless, a king of infinite data on a throne of cinder. You turn inward, seeking refuge, but there is no sanctuary left. The silence you crave has been annexed. Your own mind, once a sovereign territory, is now an occupied state, its internal rhythms dictated by an external, relentless clock. The quiet hum of contemplation has been replaced by the frantic, high-pitched whine of a machine that never sleeps. This is the new architecture of your consciousness, an engine of consumption. You mistook its ceaseless motion for thought, a fatal error. That old, noble spark, curiosity, the slow-burning fire of true learning, has mutated into a grotesque caricature of itself. It is a biological imperative hijacked, a sacred impulse perverted into a compulsive, twitching dependency. The line between inquiry and addiction has been erased. It is a synaptic scar. This is the grim science of neurochemical usury. The system operates on a variable reward schedule, a principle perfected not in laboratories of learning, but in the stale, smoke-filled desperation of casinos. The reward is never guaranteed. It arrives at random, unpredictable intervals, and this uncertainty is the key that unlocks the cage of your compulsive loops. It enslaves your attention far more effectively than any predictable pattern ever could. That jolt of novelty, that fleeting validation from a notification, is a microloan of dopamine advanced against the collateral of your focus. and the interest rate is catastrophic. With each hit, your baseline tolerance for stimulation rises. The mundane beauty of the real world, the slow drift of a cloud, the complex texture of a printed page is rendered in a dull, unclickable gray. You require ever more vibrant, more shocking, more condensed forms of stimulus to feel even a flicker of the original rush. This is the withdrawal, the bone-deep ache of a brain starving for a signal in a world that has become, by comparison, silent. Your capacity for deep, uninterrupted thought, the state of flow, is a delicate cognitive ecosystem. The machine shatters it with methodical violence. Each context switch, from a complex task to a fleeting message and back again, is a neurological concussion. It is not a seamless transition. It is a brutal gear shift that leaves your mental transmission stripped, your cognitive momentum obliterated. The residue of the previous task contaminates the present one, and the effort of re-engaging drains your finite reserves of mental energy. Learning becomes a casualty of this perpetual disruption. You skim. You absorb keywords. You mistake the recognition of a headline for the comprehension of its content. Knowledge is no longer a structure to be built, but a stream to be bathed in, its currents carrying you nowhere, leaving you clean of nothing, merely wet with disconnected facts. The very fabric of your temporal perception is being rewoven. Short-form content, a relentless barrage of ephemeral moments, acts as a kind of temporal confetti, chopping your experience of time into meaningless, disconnected slivers. The narrative arc of your own day, of your own life, dissolves. There is no longer a before that informs the after. There is only the eternal, churning now of the feed. This rewiring erodes your ability to delay gratification, to invest effort in long-term goals that offer no immediate payoff. Why build a cathedral brick by brick when you can experience the synthetic rush of 1,000 collapsing sandcastles in a single minute? Your brain adapts to this new, frantic temporality, and in doing so, it forgets the patient, profound rhythm of creation itself. And then the quiet panic sets in, a creeping existential dread born from a simple, unassailable calculation. The sheer volume of incoming information is infinite. Your capacity to process it is brutally finite. The act of catching up is a logical impossibility, a fool's errand. Yet the system is designed to make you feel perpetually behind, a step away from a crucial piece of data, a final, clarifying insight that is always just over the next scroll. This is a manufactured anxiety, a cognitive fatigue so deep it feels geological. It's the Sisyphean curse reimagined for the digital age. You are condemned to push a boulder of data up an infinite hill, only for it to roll back over you again and again. You are not organizing information. You are managing a perpetual crisis of your own attention. Here, in this state of cognitive exhaustion, the final, paradoxical truth crystallizes. Your mind has never been fuller, and your understanding has never been more vacant. You are an archive of everything and a library of nothing. The frantic activity of consumption has produced an epistemological famine. You are starving in a banquet of data. The pursuit of more knowledge has yielded less comprehension, less wisdom, less meaning. The state of being perpetually busy, of being constantly stimulated, is revealed to be the most profound form of emptiness. You are a vessel filled to the brim with sand, a perfect desolation of weight and grit, with no room left for water, no room left for life. And so a choice is made, a quiet, violent, internal act of treason against the empire of noise. You begin a deliberate and brutal process of synaptic pruning, severing the neural wires that tether you to the machine. This is not a gentle withdrawal. It is a declaration of cognitive secession, an attempt to reclaim the sovereign territory of your own skull. At first, the silence is a physical torment. It presses in on you, a suffocating vacuum where the stimulus used to be. Every cell in your body screams for the familiar chemical anesthetic of the feed. The atrophied machinery of your prefrontal cortex, the long dormant seat of executive control, groans under the strain as you force it to engage. It is the feeling of a rusted engine trying to turn over after a decade of disuse. A grinding of metal, a biological resistance. You begin with simple, almost foolish exercises in sustained attention, holding a single, unadorned thought, following the thread of a complex sentence in a physical book, the friction of your thumb on the paper, a grounding, haptic anchor in a world of frictionless glass. This is the front line of the rebellion, and it is a bloody, metabolic war. The phantom limbs of your digital self twitch with the urge to switch, to scan, to consume. The ghost of a notification flickers in your peripheral vision, but you hold the line. Each second of sustained focus is a small victory, a single neuron firing in a new, defiant pattern, a microscopic crack in the walls of your conditioning. This is neurofeedback in its rawest form, your own consciousness, a biohacking tool, consciously carving new riverbeds for thought to flow through. Then comes the digital detox, a forced exile into the analog world. The first hours are a purgatory of phantom vibrations and annoying directionless anxiety. You are stripping your senses of the hyper-novelty they have become dependent on, and the withdrawal is a visceral, crawling sensation under the skin. But then, something shifts. The background noise of the world, once drowned out by the digital roar, begins to resolve into high-definition clarity, attention restoration, theory, not as an academic concept, but as a felt reality, the complex, non-repeating fractal patterns of a leaf, the subtle gradations of light in a setting sun. These natural stimuli begin to gently recalibrate your exhausted mind. You are offloading the cognitive burden back onto the world itself, allowing your brain to heal from the relentless, artificial demands of the screen. Your latent cognitive capacities, long suppressed, begin to stir, With this newfound quiet, a dangerous awareness begins to dawn. You start to see the architecture of your own cage with a horrifying clarity. The manipulative logic of the variable reward schedule no longer feels like an exciting game of chance. It feels like the precise, cold, and impersonal mechanism of a slaughterhouse. You can feel the algorithm's pull for what it is, a neurochemical leash. This knowledge is a form of epistemological armor. The desire for the next hit doesn't vanish, but it is now contaminated with the bitter taste of its own artifice. Your brain, slowly, painstakingly, begins to recalibrate its reward thresholds. The fleeting synthetic jolt of a like pales in comparison to the slow-release satisfaction of solving a difficult problem, of creating something, of engaging in a conversation with another human being, uninterrupted for more than 3 minutes. And then it happens. In a moment of deep, focused work or quiet contemplation, the noise finally ceases completely. The static dissolves. You achieve a state of sustained, lucid attention for the first time in what feels like a lifetime. It is a forbidden clarity, a terrifying, beautiful, and profoundly lonely state of being. Your thoughts are no longer a chaotic swarm of stinging insects, but a coherent, linear progression. You can feel the beginning, middle, and end of your own ideas. Time itself seems to slow, to deepen, to gain a weight and texture you had forgotten was possible. This is cognitive sovereignty, the experience of a mind that is finally, blessedly, its own. It is an ontological homecoming that reveals just how far you have been in exile. You have woken from a dream that everyone else is still having. You exist now as a ghost at the feast. You move through a world saturated with a light you no longer see, deaf to a music that no longer charms. This is the Cold War of the sovereign mind. Your newfound clarity is a form of exile, an epistemological disconnect from the hive. You watch them, the others, their faces illuminated by the pale necrotic glow of their devices, their minds caught in the frantic, gyroscopic spin of the feed, and you feel not pity, not superiority, but the profound and chilling solitude of the awake among the dreaming. You have committed the cardinal sin of the digital age. You have chosen. The great lie was that knowledge was a form of accumulation, a quantitative measure of worth. A bigger library, a faster connection, a fuller mind. You now understand the truth is a brutal inversion of this premise. True knowledge is an act of surgical excision. It is measured not by what you absorb, but by what you consciously, ruthlessly choose to ignore. This is strategic ignorance, the most potent weapon in your new arsenal. You learn to treat information not as a nutrient, but as a potential toxin. You build cognitive firewalls. You practice a form of synaptic asceticism, starving the neural pathways that crave the empty calories of noise, and nourishing the ones that thrive on substance. You let the torrent of ephemeral data wash over you, and you stand still, a rock in the river, unmoved. This act of curation begins to rewire the very foundations of your reward system. The frantic, twitching search for novelty, the chemical hunger for the next microdopamine loan begins to subside. In its place, a deeper, more resonant satisfaction emerges. It is the reward of mastery, the slow, geological pleasure of building a single, coherent thought to its conclusion, the deep, metabolic warmth that comes from creating something, from solving a problem that demands the full, undivided force of your attention. Your brain, healing itself, learns to crave the complex carbohydrates of deep work, no longer satisfied by the sugar rush of a notification. This is dopamine recalibrated, not a drug administered by an algorithm, but a wage earned for authentic cognitive labor. Your mind becomes a fortress, and you are its architect. You engage in a constant, metacognitive feedback loop, your own consciousness observing its own processes, a sentinel on the watchtower of your thoughts. You decide what information is granted entry and what is left to perish outside the gates. This is selective attention theory, not as a chapter in a textbook, but as a lived, moment-to-moment combat discipline. You learn to offload the cognitive ballast, the endless, trivial, administrative tasks of modern life onto external systems, not as a convenience, but as a strategic liberation of neural resources. You are freeing up your working memory for its true purpose, not to be a cluttered warehouse of fleeting facts, but to be a crucible for synthesis, for the forging of new ideas. And in this focused, protected space, a latent capacity blossoms: creativity. The ghost in the machine begins to build, and here, in the quiet citadel of your curated mind, you experience the final, staggering inversion. The system promised you omniscience through infinite connection, and it gave you a desolation of meaningless data. Now, by disconnecting, by choosing, by building walls, you achieve a state that feels more like true omniscience than anything the machine could ever offer. It is the omniscience of the master cartographer, not the frantic tourist. You do not need to visit every street to understand the city. You need to understand its structure, its logic, its soul. You perceive the world not as an unending, chaotic stream of input, but as a coherent, interconnected system, a pattern you can finally see because you have eliminated the static. This is not the passive reception of information. This is the active construction of reality, a sovereignty of the soul, psychological context. Bridge. Having achieved internal stability, the sovereign mind must now confront the ultimate challenge, projecting its newfound order onto a world actively engineering its decay. You no longer chase the totality of the world. You curate it. Where information once flooded you, indiscriminately, you now impose borders. Attention becomes currency again, finite, guarded, deliberate. Not everything deserves entry. Most things deserve silence. This is the final inversion. Knowledge was never power through accumulation. Power emerges through exclusion. You learn to ignore with precision, to starve the algorithms by denying them reaction, to treat data not as nourishment, but as a substance that must earn its right to be consumed. In this selective quiet, synthesis returns. Ideas connect, meaning condenses, creation replaces consumption. The world remains loud, the deluge does not stop, but it no longer owns you. You stand inside the noise untouched, not omniscient but oriented, not informed but sovereign, and that is enough.